Hello everybody and welcome back to Connect to Tech. We are going to be looking at today Computex 2019 and what was announced there, including the release of Ryzen 3000 chips. Ooh. I need like a button that makes sound effects and then it can press a button and it go, ooh, and just a crowd. Ah.
Like launching a fireworks display, except it's processors.
Exactly.
Anyway. So yeah, Ryzen 3000. Very exciting. I'm really excited. Very, very, very excited for these chips. We've had some information on the core counts and IPC improvements. That's instructions per clock, and the thread count things. Oh man, I'm so excited.
Well, also, so the 3000 series essentially is the third generation of Ryzen chips, because we've had the 1000, the 2000, 3000. We did a previous podcast talking about AMD versus Intel. Yes. So go and check that out if you're a bit behind with what they're currently sort of competing with each other.
Yeah, how they're doing as companies.
As competitors, yeah. So did you see that it says they're going to be 7nm? Yes,
that's very exciting. TMSCs, I think.
Has that been done yet, or is that
right? 7nm is new for this generation.
Are there any Intel chips with that?
Intel's still on, I think, 12 or 14nm actually. They've had some serious 14, lack of supply, like supply issues for 14nm. Well, 10nm and 14nm, I think. Which is recently why there's been such a lack of Intel chips on them in the marketplace, really.
Which makes them all even more expensive. Hooray!
Well, they're nowhere. No one can make them. They have trouble. The thing is that Intel owns their own fabs, so instead of getting different companies to fabricate the chips, Intel fabricates them themselves. Which means that if their fabrication systems are having problems, say their process isn't up to speed yet or has an extremely low pass rate, so most of the chips that are built don't pass muster, you end up with a serious supply-demand issue, which in this case is actually quite a problem. It used to be that when you had a lower supply and a higher demand, it meant you could charge more and it was good for business and things like that. But it's gotten so bad that Intel just can't get chips out of the door.
Which means so much of a problem,
they're having to cherry pick sections of their lineup that they aim to build chips for. Like they'll build an i9 because it has a high profit margin, rather than building, say, an i3 because it won't won't sell half as well, and things like that. So they're having real trouble getting chips out the door these days, and this won't be helping.
So is that so in comparison to that, is it because Intel manufacture in-house?
Yes, I think so, because AMD uses TMSC and a few other out-of-house chip builders, so the actual people who make the silicon.
Right.
They can offset issues with different processes by just asking another set of people, giving them the information of the chip, giving them the spec and everything they need, and telling them to go nuts and build them. Because Intel's waiting for their own people to finish fixing their own problems, it means they can't just get chips out of the door. They have to fix whatever's broken and then get chips out of the door.
Well, it also kind of explains why Intel are hesitating on moving on to a smaller architecture, because if they want to start making 7nm chips and they've only got a limited number of manufacturing plants that they own themselves, then they would have to sacrifice even more production of 14nm chips to then make 7nm chips.
It would cut production in half because they'd have to put an entire production line onto setting up for 7nm, and then by the time you finally get 7nm chips out of the door, you could have lost, what, 2 quarters, 3 quarters?
Yeah,
which is, and that's a lot of chips.
Which is just kind of a
gone
lose-lose situation, because they're falling behind because they're not moving over to it, but if they move, it's not great for Intel.
If they move over, they lose even more ground. It's like they've recently been losing a lot of ground to AMD, not only because AMD can get chips out of the door, but the chips they're getting out are fantastic. You know, the Ryzen series has been a renaissance for AMD, even, I'd say, because they've gone from the admittedly under-spec'd and slightly expensive FX Bulldozer and pile driver chips to these new processors that really are looking like a very good value option.
Yeah.
Even the top of the line new chip, which will be about £390, is a 12-core, 24-thread chip that the Intel equivalent costs nearly £1,000.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking that because, I was looking at when you said about your possible plan to get a Ryzen build, which has since changed. If we manage to get the VR podcast out, you'll understand. That will be last episode. I did look at what kind of thing people use for a more modern editing system, because obviously mine is quite dated realistically in terms of the processor. Like, it's not slow, but it isn't new. So I was looking at things like the 8600K and crying at the price tag on something like that.
The sheer cost of these things
is just insane. I mean,
the 8600K is a 6-core chip, 6-core 12-thread.
Yes. Which
the bottom new AMD processor, the Ryzen 5 3600, is a 6-core 12-thread chip with a 4.2 GHz boost and a 3.6 base. So that's a higher boost and base clock than that processor.
Wow.
All whilst being a lower TDP. That's a 65-watt chip.
And a much lower cost.
That one is £160.
Well, there you go.
Which is insanity compared to, that's like... It's like eating caviar or, it's like being starving hungry and going down into the kitchen for your breakfast and eating a bowl full of Weetabix caviar rather than eating some Shreddies. Shreddies are really good for you and will be brilliant for your day, and they're fine. But, a Beruga caviar bloody Weetabix is stupid.
Well, I think
that was a terrible analogy. Bloody hell.
I know, it did.
I was working really hard for that one, and it was useless.
Oh, it tried.
Anyway,
I think
the new chips have come.
Well, based on that fact, I think that when I eventually move from the current platform I'm on, it should be one of those.
Well, I think everyone is thinking about Ryzen more and more. It's like I was on an Intel chipset. I was on 1155 socket, as I've said before, and I moved to AM3 socket with the AMD chipsets and everything like that, and it was cheaper. But again, it's a Bulldozer chip, so it's not as good as an equivalent Intel processor was back in the day, but they're cheap, which is why I picked one up. And it was it's like I said in the Intel versus AMD thing, it was because I picked up a Phenom, and then I picked up a board, and then that board also supported the FX processors, so I thought, why not just move from one to the other? And that's another thing they've come out and said about Ryzen 3rd Gen, is that 3rd Gen chips will work in 1st Gen motherboards.
Which is what we made a whole podcast about.
Also, 1st Gen chips will work in 3rd Gen motherboards, vice versa. So say you buy a new motherboard, because it's easier to buy new motherboards. Buying used motherboards is sometimes quite difficult, I always think.
Yeah, well, especially if the compatibility's never changed, then no one's going to be selling them second hand, are they? That's the only thing. You're not going to see many 1st Gen Ryzen boards used, because everyone's still going to be using them.
Well, they're still on them, unless they want a new feature set. But even then, those boards probably won't lose that much value. No. But it means that when you buy a new board, it's going to have intrinsic value for a good number of years. If you say buy a Ryzen 3 3rd gen board now,
so you would be better buying a
still
3rd
an
gen
AM4,
board and a 1st gen processor, for example.
Well, yeah, if you wanted to start off, because the processor is always the most expensive bit.
Yeah.
The motherboard holds it all together, but no one really spends much more than, well, no one I know, being a cheapskate, spends much more than 50, 60 quid on a motherboard, or at least I never would.
Yeah, I spent 60-ish, 60.
But I was looking at 1st gen Ryzen motherboards, and you can pick up a nice SLI or Crossfire compatible board with decent, I/O and all that stuff. All the stuff I don't mind not having USB 3.1 or Type C or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or Thunderbolt or any of that. Or, those moderner features, because I don't have anything that uses that. So, having the older boards support the newer chips means that you can move easier to the new platform, and in the same way, like I was just saying, having a cheap chip on a brand new motherboard will be interesting, I think. Because, I'm looking at 1600s, a Ryzen 7, like 1700X or something. Actually 1700, so the 8-core 16-thread chip from a good couple of years ago now is still a very good chip and a very significant upgrade from what I'm on.
Yeah.
But it's a lot cheaper than me buying, say, one of the new Ryzen 7 3700s. But I could buy a new motherboard, so I don't have to worry about buying a used motherboard, and sometimes they can be, worrying. You don't know how they've spent their lives. Has someone been running, SLI GTX 480s and cooked the damn thing? A friend of mine at university just made the move for his girlfriend, actually. Who really needed a new computer. She was on the old FM2 socket from AMD, the old APUs.
Yes.
From a while back. Well, she had an old APU and a 750 Ti, and he finally decided that she should make the move. So they put the money together and they got a 1700, Ryzen 7 1700, 8 gigs of DDR4, and a 1070. One of the shorter 1070s.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Zotac one. And they invited me over to put it all together. And there was a bit of fiddling because the Windows install was balked or something.
That's always where you get the most problems, I feel.
All of the hardware went together without a problem. It was just Windows. In the end, I had to pull out an old Dell keyboard that had Windows-based drivers, so that they didn't have to install extra drivers, so they could actually get through the Windows installation, just to, put a fresh copy of Windows 10 onto the machine, because it wouldn't even take anything. I even offered them my copy of Windows 7, my Infinite 7s. But in the end, it got sorted. But I was speaking to him again recently. He came over for a barbecue, and he's blown away. He's got a 4000 series Intel processor in his main rig, and it's a nice rig. It's a 4970K, I think. So it's the i7 from back in the day. 4-core, 8 threads.
You say from back in the day, but it's still 2 generations newer than mine.
It's like a nice chip, like a really nice chip.
It's not.
And he's got a really nice graphics card and all this stuff. And he's blown away by how much better this computer he's just built is.
Yeah, for half the price.
It was built on a budget because it was a 1000 series chip on a 300 series motherboard. So it was the older motherboard with the older chip, and it kicks the crap out of his.
Wow.
But yeah, this Computex has been very interesting, and there's been a lot of takes on the new AMD processors. And one of the big things is it used to be the difference between AMD and Intel was temperature, performance, and power consumption. They were the big things. Is like an AMD chip may perform as well as an Intel chip, but it will be more power hungry, run hotter, and might be more expensive.
Yeah.
Just overall to run and things like that. These days, it's actually the opposite.
I was about to ask you that. In terms of... Because you know how you said yours is a bulldozer chip, and therefore the equivalent Intel chip would be better. Is that untrue with Ryzen versus current Intel?
Yeah, I think so, because that big chip, the Ryzen 9 3900X, is a 12-core, 24-thread part, knocking on the door of 4 gigahertz.
So is the performance per core better?
The instructions per clock has gone up once again, so they were a 15% performance increase to instruction per clock, which means that each core is now performing better on Ryzen 3000 than it did on 2000, and 2000 was knocking on the door of Intel, really giving them something to think about.
So 3000
they
could
even
potentially
get
be
above.
Wow.
But that 12 cores is a 105 watt chip. 12 cores,
I think that's
24
less than
threads
mine.
at 3.8 gigahertz base clock with a 4.6 boost.
Base clock, wow.
At 105 watt.
I
That's
genuinely think that might be
insanity.
less than mine because mine's such an old dog.
Well, I've got my
I'm just
Bulldozer
checking now.
chip, which were always known to be hot and power hungry.
Yes.
So I've got 8 cores, 8 threads. You can't really say cores because they're Bulldozer cores, so they're kind of half cores, but they're also not, and there's that whole debacle from back then.
But what I'm
But
saying
anyway-
is the Ryzen ones aren't Bulldozer cores.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
And so I've got this chip and I'm trying to push on 4 gigahertz and nearly getting there. Trying to push past 4 to a bit further, and I'm pulling 125 watts or higher. I think at one point I pulled 150 watts because I was doing some serious overclocking, putting a lot of voltage through the core.
Yeah.
So that's a lot more cores, a lot more performance for
Oh, mine's
significantly
95.
less wattage.
But it's seriously close. To
Well, yours is 95, but you've got 4 cores and 8 threads.
Exactly.
And this
so that's
is
how
more than double.
it's double, and it's only 10 watts more.
Mm.
Well, do you know what's really upsetting? What we were saying about it being 8 nanometer. I've just opened up Specky, and mine's 32.
Yeah, I'm on 32 nanometers as well.
Oh, we're both running dinosaur chips.
Yeah,
realistically,
Egyptian. There's rumours about the new AMD graphics cards coming out, and there's rumours that the PlayStation 5 will include a Ryzen 8-core CPU and a full brand new Navi-based GPU, which is very interesting, I think.
Ooh.
So, brand new architecture, third gen it's Ryzen 2 is the architecture, but it's 3000 series Ryzen processors, because the 1000 and 2000 series Ryzen chips were on the same architecture, just a rebuilt and sort of refined version of Ryzen 1, or Zen 1 as it was.
Yeah.
So Zen 2 is nice, and oh man, I just keep rereading all this stuff. It's like the TDP down to 75 watts for a 6-core chip. Oh, bloody hell!
That's just crazy stuff. Well, didn't they also announce some Intel graphics card potential?
There's a lot of rumour.
There's a lot of
floating around
speculation.
For a fully Intel-based graphics processor.
I don't know how they'd make those if they can't make their own processors.
Yeah, they're talking about it running on 7 nanometer as well, but I think that's going to be out of their. That's not going to be their fab.
Outsourced.
I think it's
Yeah,
going to be
probably.
outsourced. The fabrication is going to be
That
done
would make sense.
at TMSC or somewhere else.
It's rumoured sometime in
Global Foundries,
2020.
maybe. But yeah, they're talking
Because
about
they
that
did.
very
There's a
much.
tweet on Intel News. Intel's first discrete GPU coming 2020.
They're really pushing into that area. They've sniped a lot of people from AMD and from Nvidia. Lots of people have been sniped over to Intel to help do the PR and the construction of these chips. The main architect of the Polaris GPU, the RX 480 and its brethren, has been poached from AMD over to Intel now to work on their new chips. And there's a lot floating around that even the integrated graphics on Intel processors is going to be vastly improved this coming generation.
That would make sense if they're doing
Because
that.
that's the thing AMD has been kicking their butt on forever. is that Intel HD graphics is a joke. It's always been a joke.
It's just essentially a VGA port.
It's just a playground insult. Ah, you went in Intel HD graphics. Oh, silly console peasant. Oh, poor child. You don't know what PC building is, Intel HD graphics. Don't be daft.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. Like, you run it for 15 minutes to double check that your motherboard is working okay before you plop everything into your computer properly, and then you put a dedicated card in there.
And then you never use it again ever.
Yeah.
Unless something
use it to
goes seriously wrong.
if your graphics card breaks. That's it.
Yeah.
It's troubleshooting, essentially. It may as well be a chip on the motherboard, because it was so redundant on all the processors. Yes, some of the more recent ones used it to help with encoding in video editing, with the Iris Pro and things like that. But again, it was laughing stock of the gaming scene. You know, you had the Ryzen 2200G and the bigger boy 2300G Ryzen 5, and they were APUs from the Ryzen side, but they had full Vega graphics, and they kicked some serious ass. Like, they trumped everything in integrated graphics. Even those Devil's Canyon i7s they put in their little nooks that were supposed to be like gaming nooks, and they just weren't.
Yeah.
Like the Iris Pro stuff, and they kept complaining, and then there was like the Intel UHD graphics is the new thing now, because that's what they've replaced it with. And they're still changing the name. Useless. It just added a U because of Ultra HD, enabled the chips to run 4K, and that's it. They just increased the available pixel count.
Well,
to the chip, and that's it.
What I've got here says that they may. I mean, it's largely speculation. We hardly know anything at this point.
Yeah, there's very little floating around.
But there's people hoping that they're going to sort of start out with some mid-range cards, because currently, obviously, Nvidia doesn't have much to compete with at the moment in the mid-range.
Well, mid-range, they've got the 1650, which has been widely proven to be a completely pointless card.
Well, exactly, that's what I mean. It's not really much.
Because the RX 570, which costs less than a 1650, is trumps it on performance quite readily.
Yeah.
So it's pointless buying a 1650. It's cheaper to buy an RX 570, or sometimes it's cheaper to buy an RX 580 than a 1650, and that absolutely creams it.
Wow.
You know, if you want ray tracing, so far AMD's the only person you can really go to, but as far as I can tell, that's mostly just a buzzword, because I've not really seen... You've seen all the bloody demonstrations and things, and they look spectacular.
Yes, but they're designed for demonstration purposes. That's the issue.
Yeah.
There's no real-world application yet.
In real life, other than in professional use, such as movies and things like that, it's just unnecessary at the moment. We've gotten so good at approximating these things without using ray tracing that it doesn't seem that big of a deal.
Well,
when was the last time you were looking at a vehicle in a video game and thought, all those reflections look weird?
Well, it's like, do you know what it's like? It's like 8K televisions. Because there's no point having them, A, because no one can see that high pixel density with the human eye anyway, and B, nothing is filmed in 8K apart from Linus Tech Tip videos. But what I'm saying, my point is that nothing is built from the ground up for it. Because
terrestrial TV still isn't even properly in 1080p.
No, they're getting there, but they're not,
Yeah,
so,
720p even for the HD channel.
So if you apply that to the fact that they're trying to use ray tracing, they pay off a few developers to make, like Tomb Raider was actually made for it, wasn't it? But that was so they could prove that there was a point to having it. But there's nothing else.
None of the games that have come out so far use ray tracing in every possible use. Some use ray traced sound, which I must admit is a very good idea. Uses the traced rays to accurately calculate audio, which has always been a problem in gaming, because audio hasn't changed since the having a dedicated audio card days. That's when it used to be interesting. Now it's just use your on-board motherboard, audio, and that's that.
Yeah.
Or you run it through your graphics card, and maybe that has an audio chip, and maybe it doesn't, and who the hell really cares anyway?
That is an interesting application.
But that's one way of using it, but no game has used it for
we need
ray-traced audio, ray-traced shadows and reflections, and ray-traced anti-aliasing and DXR and all that stuff.
They need a load of content to use all that. It's just like if they were actually going to sell 8K TVs, they'd need a load of 8K content, but also at the same time they'd need people to be able to tell the difference, which is obviously a lot harder to make happen.
Just calm down with the whole resolution thing and just give up console gamers 60 FPS.
Yeah.
It's like the refresh rate in the PSVR is variable from 90 to 110 hertz.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant, because it means that some games can run at 110 hertz and look really smooth, and make sure that you don't feel sick with the motion or anything like that. And then the things that don't need to, like when you're watching just a movie through it using the built-in cinema thing, it can just run at 90 and save some energy and things. So
that is smart.
A variable refresh rate monitors moving to the mainstream, or just getting consoles out of this 30 FPS rut,
which may happen with the PS5.
We hope.
I think as more gets released with that, we'll do a podcast on that.
Yeah,
because there's not enough to discuss now, really.
Yeah. When a lot more comes out about that, we'll have to cover that.
Should we start thinking about wrapping up?
I think so. I think we've really whittled on a little too much already about these 3000 series chips.
Is there anything else? I mean, I'm just reading the sort of low-key stuff like Gigabyte releasing some faster new SSDs, and
I think other than PCIe 4.0, which is coming with the new Ryzen chips, there's not really much else, because again that's all wraps into the Ryzen chips. Is that PCIe 4.0 is out in the wild, and it's significantly faster bandwidth than PCIe 3.0.
So that potentially would be another reason why to buy a new motherboard and an older chip.
Yeah. The new motherboards are looking nice on that front, because you can run several PCIe SSDs in RAID off of one PCIe lane, rather than spreading it across multiple, because you can fit higher bandwidth lanes.
Do you need a specific card to appreciate the difference between PCIe 3 and 4?
I think you must, because you need to be able to have...
there must be a cut-off point.
PCIe 4.0 SSDs, they have to be up to the standard, because otherwise they will just expect the 3.0 lane, and that will be that.
Yeah.
That said, there's not very many graphics cards that are saturating 3.0. In fact, I don't think any are, even all the way up to a Titan RTX card.
Right.
So it's interesting to see what AMD is going to bring out graphics card-wise to saturate that 4.0 lane.
Any last thoughts?
AMD, yay! Intel need to buck their ideas up. But competition is good for the PC industry as a whole, so I'm happy that there is some competition happening for once. Rather than just Intel sitting there going, no one needs more than 4 processing cores. We've had 4 processing cores for 6 years now. And then AMD goes, suck it, we just brought 8 cores. And now they've gone, suck it, enjoy 12 cores. And there's rumours of a 16-core chip coming. So, yeah. We are looking at an exciting time in the tech space right now.
If in fact in what the tech.
Yes.
Very
What's
exciting.
the tech?
Well, thank you for listening. If you did, if you didn't, why not?
Sorry about the wittering.
If you zoned out halfway through, don't worry. It's ended now.
Yeah, we're done. We won't take up any more of your precious whenever you are
precious summer holidays time.
Yeah, summer holidays. Woo!
So we'll probably be more active on the
clouds.
channel, because we've actually finally got time.
Might even get some of those tech experiments up at some point.
Some of those tech experiments you've been hearing so much about that don't exist. Right. So, thank you. If you've got any specific tech news you think we should take a look at, put it in the comments. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it.
More than us,
and
then please tell us.
If yes, exactly, yes. So yeah, thank you for listening, and
Yes, thank
goodbye from me.
Bye from me too.
Alright, you're not staying here by yourself then.
No, I'm leaving.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.